Soccer Today is powered by Spin Media. From podcast to video production, visit spinmediadigitalsolutions.com and bring your content to the next level.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, golazo, golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Mullins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Friday, August 26, 2022. We're back as my computer problems have been resolved after a hard drive that decided to be defective and literally had physical damage, which my computer guy told me, Duane, that he's never seen. He's never seen this in 20 years. And of course it happened when I was getting ready for a game. How was your week?
It was pretty good. Watched a little bit of soccer, watched a little bit of baseball. It's getting that time of year. I know you've been watching more baseball this year through your other job. So getting into pen races, that's fun. Catch up on stuff. Did a little of my real work too. That got in there at some point if my bosses were listening, for sure. It did.
If you're listening, yes, he is working. Yeah. All right, let's talk about one player who has been working overtime, traveling to Europe and getting the transfer done. Djordje Mihailovic has now been officially transferred to AZ Alkmaar in the Eredivisie, back on loan until the end of the season with CF Montreal. Djordje Mihailovic's dream of playing in Europe will take place next year. Next transfer window in January, that will be all official. But for now, while he's actually not even back on loan, it's just not official yet that the transfer will just take place since the famous 6-month thing, But for Djordje Mihailovic, Duane, his European dreams are going to continue, going to be reality. For CF Montreal, it's transferring $1 million they paid with Chicago last year to $6 million or more that they're going to get to AZ Alkmaar. 10% will go back to Chicago, but Montreal did include a future transfer clause if Djordje gets transferred out of AZ. AZ is famous for having a couple of names that would be familiar in Major League Soccer. That's where Jozy Altidore had his best European season. It was in the Eredivisie with AZ Alkmaar. That's where Haris Medunyanin also played, and Hector Moreno also played for this club that you could say is maybe the 5th biggest club in the Netherlands. But Djordje Mihailovic will be playing in Europe next year.
Yeah, AZ is a club that you occasionally see in Europa League, that kind of club. For those that don't know, I imagine many of our listeners do. But it's a decent club, and more importantly, the Eredivisie is a level that I think is a great launching point for people to make a second step. It's similar to the Belgian league in that manner, in the sense that it's a testing ground for a lot of players to go over and see what they can do. And perhaps they can then gain another jump from there. I imagine in Djordje's case, getting back to Montreal was important too, both to finish the project that has been started with there and potentially maybe, the East is fairly wide open. As much as Philadelphia is a really solid team, no one, I think, is going to come out and say that they're a slam dunk, no can't miss team to go all the way through the playoffs. So you'd have to think a team like Montreal might think that if they get hot, they might be able to make an MLS Cup final, and then who knows, right? So he'd want to be around for that. And additionally, I doubt that he has completely given up on the possibility of maybe making another side trip to the Middle East in November as well, although he's certainly on the bubble for there. So, yeah, it's a good move for him. It's a good opportunity to finish this project here. It's less of a known commodity what it's going to be into Montreal. I think, if anything, it might just make this year more of in your face, let's get it done kind of moment. If you're going to lose a player that yes, you're going to get some money in to replace, but you'd rather have a warm body than Gam, right? So
the window is now. The window is now for Montreal. And if you are a long-time listener of Soccer Today, you know that. That's what I've been saying for weeks and weeks. And Duane, I'm going to start by touting my own horn. I rarely do this, but back in February, I predicted the season of CF Montreal literally to a T. I literally predicted this timeline that would land up to here, and even said that Djordje Mihailovic will probably finish the season in Montreal, but this year was the year. This is positive for a couple reasons. Duane, to me, it's positive because it does give the blueprint to other young stars that are looking for a stepping stepping off point, a launching pad, a launching platform. We're going to see Artemis 1 leave the Earth soon. So another launching platform could be Montreal when you are a star in the making in the soccer world. And we're seeing that with Djordje. This would be effectively the biggest transfer in CF Montreal's history by multiple millions. It's about 6 million that's been rumored, plus additional add-ons. I guess that's an oxymoron, saying additional add-ons. So with add-ons, it could be more than 6 million. Duane, to me, this shows, like I was saying, a willingness to Montreal to sell young talents after they have made them a bit better. This is also a credit to the development skills of Wilfried Nancy and how you can make value. The balance sheet has been in the red since Montreal's been joining Major League Soccer. And over a couple years, with the advent of Olivier Renard, it's been openly said that they're looking to sell more players to see some of that balance sheet go into the positive when it comes to transfers, and not just transfers in, but transfers out with some big numbers. This is the first one, probably of many, when we look at Alistair Johnston and Kamal Miller in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think that there is a different model that you can look at. We've talked a little bit about this here in terms of the middle sort of level, the sort of the stepping stone kind of player that you can bring in as a team like Montreal, where you may not have the resources to bring in the bigger names, but then you can kind of make a bit of that gap up by developing guys mid-career, like early mid-career, I guess, to take that next step and get the profit off of that. And then you can use that profit to hopefully build and sustain something moving forward to a championship at MLS level. You know, Philadelphia is doing that from a kids level, like they're doing it internally.
Literally, they're like 18 years old and they're being sold, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas this is a different kind of way to do it. One of the things it sort of speaks to overall is this approach, this idea that there now are multiple different ways to build an MLS team. There didn't used to be. It kind of was the same, right? That you needed to get your spine of domestic talent, your lifers, as we used to call in the show all the time, and then you would supplement that with the right DP signings, and you could build a championship team now. Whereas I think now in MLS you have multiple ways you can do that. You can do it through an academy build, selling those players on, even getting a system in there that works within that plug-and-play system, like we see in Philadelphia, like we see in several New York Red Bulls, that they do that plug and play kind of idea where you can always sort of be there and you can sell on and then not really lose much traction there. And then you're going to see this kind of middle range where you're having players like Alistair Johnston, as you say, which might be the next one out, you can then build and make more money off of. And eventually, you know, you have pockets of years where you can go for it. It's a realization, I think, where, you know, it's a realization amongst teams that are doing that they can't compete to win a championship 5 out of 5 years, but they can maybe compete to win a championship 1 or 2 out of every 5 years. And really, if you can do that consistently, you're going to be fine. There are going to be teams, I think, within the new model of MLS that can compete to win a championship 5 out of 5 years. Seattle's, your LAFCs. You know, if Toronto ever gets the money right again, then they might be in there too. Teams that can spend,
yeah.
But you know, this is another way to do it.
It's very interesting this season too, because when you look at the top 5 clubs in Major League Soccer right now, yes, LAFC is miles ahead of everybody with the glitz and glamour, but who's really contributing to that team is not the big money players. It's Christian Arango with his 12 goals. It's Palacios defensively. And that is the core of that team. And it's not the big names that are performing this year, outside of a couple, of course, but it's the Romel Kyoto, who are not making 10 millions a year, who's scoring 14 goals. It's the Brandon Vasquez, who just renewed his contract with Cincinnati, who's scoring a ton of goals. And that's one of the reasons why Montreal is third in the power rankings of MLS, is that team play. But we'll talk about that later when we look at the schedule and the weekend preview in MLS. Now, Duane, let's go to the Canadian Premier League. Yesterday, big announcement by the Canadian Premier League, and since last winter, the CanPL was in search of a new commissioner. And now, it's been made official, and it was announced yesterday, Mark Noonan, named CPL Commissioner and CEO of Canadian Soccer Business. Who is Mark Noonan? Great question. And if you would ask me that question 24 hours ago, I would not have been able to answer you. Now I have the answer right here. He is a native of Westport, Connecticut. And this is, of course, from the Canadian Premier League press release. Previously spent 2 years as Chief Marketing Officer with the U.S. Soccer Federation, developing the U.S. soccer brand. He was a key figure in the successful marketing of the U.S. women's national team that won the 1999 FIFA Women's World Cup. Of course, the Brandy Chastain run is where that took place and created a groundswell of support for female athletes nationwide. Noonan then moved to Major League Soccer, where as Executive Vice President of Marketing and Fan Development, he reported directly to Commissioner of the League and CEO of Soccer United Marketing, leading the overall strategic marketing and branding for the league, its team, and properties. Noonan more recently served as the Chief Executive Officer of Accra Hearts of Oak SC in Accra, Ghana. Through Focal Sport, the international sports and entertainment agency founded by Noonan in 2005. He has represented the clients such as the New York Mets, helping them secure the largest name and right deal in MLB history at the time with Citibank for Citi Field, the International Basketball Federation, FIBA, MLS the RNA Professional Bull Riders. Noonan also spent 3 years as the Global Chief Commercial Officer for World Surf League from 2014 to 2017 and served as the Director of Integrated Marketing for the iconic beverage brand Gatorade, who is one of the sponsors of the CanPL.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and be fair about this. I mean, this is just a generic kind of C-level executive that they've hired, which is fine from a business perspective. This isn't a business podcast, so we're not going to be able to really break down his career and sort of talk about it beyond the soccer side of it here, right? There is some soccer on that resume, which is a positive thing. I think that in the past, perhaps they might have been a little bit centric in trying to keep everything a little too narrow in terms of where they were drawing talent from. So they've cast the net a little wider here. I think there's a fair criticism that this is not a particularly diverse hire. It's a white middle-aged dude. That's a reflection of the society that we live in, and that no one other than white middle-aged dudes have the experience kind of needed to run these leagues. But that's something that's a long-term fix. I will recognize that, though. In terms of what this will mean for the CanPL, I don't think anyone could possibly know. We could speculate based on his history there. We would hope that because he was in an organization that did support or did recognize the PAs, that they will now finally recognize the PA, the Canadian PA. So that's step one in my mind.
Yeah, you're mentioning the PFA, the Pro Football Association, the PF Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the union, if you prefer. It's not accurate completely, but in sort of a flippant way, it's a union.
Yeah, players represented. And that's so it doesn't come from an anti-labor like David Kleinekine was.
Yeah, there's nothing to. Sorry, Kevin. Yeah, there's nothing to suggest he's anti-labor. So we don't know yet. So we're not going to guess. We're just going to hope that that's the case. Look, there's a lot of fires to put out. There are. Let's be frank. I mean, we're coming into fourth year next year. There is an expansion team coming in to take this team to 9. That's a little slower than I think that would be in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver. That group is announced, and we don't know exactly where it's going to take place, but it is right now, according to everything that they're saying, are going to happen next year. We don't know what's happening with FC Edmonton. They don't have an owner. They are struggling on and off the field. That's an issue that needs to be worked out. York United, they hired someone from out of the Region 2 to run that club on the president's social side recently as well. So they're kind of struggling off and on the field as well. We've got teams like the Wanderers, which are doing well off the field, but aren't necessarily doing well on the field. There's questions there. There's a bit of a divide in this league in terms of the haves and have-nots, but it's chugging along. There are some definite challenges for the next guy in charge. And what I will say is that someone called this hire Noonan a mini Don Garber or a quasi Don Garber. I mean, as much as I have issues with Don Garber for certain decisions he's made, it's not necessarily even him. It's certain decisions that the league has made collectively and he has headed up. CanPL should be so lucky if they can get someone that can lead them in the way to the levels that MLS has gotten to from the time he took over. If you don't realize that, you weren't paying attention back then. MLS was at the brink of collapse when he took over.
Oh, literally, yeah. Like you had like 3 or 4 owners owning like all the teams. But if we just want to finish our CanPL talk before taking the break and moving on to the weekend preview, Dwayne, tomorrow Soccer Quebec is going to announce a study that they want to do in the region of Quebec, and they want to do a open study and ask the population if they would like a CPL team in the Quebec region. And Soccer Quebec's initiative is to get behind the potential of a team, and then Soccer Quebec would be probably financially involved and have a structure that would give opportunities to the best players in Quebec to maybe be part of that team per se, maybe fed by the best players of the PLSQ. Anyways, tomorrow, according to multiple sources online and in print, Soccer Quebec is supposed to announce that it will have a market study with the possibility of wanting a CPL team in the region of Quebec in the future.
Well, and look, we've said this multiple times in this show. You're not a truly national league until you're in French Canada. I mean, I'm even going to stretch it far enough to, I guess they're technically in French Canada because Ottawa would be sort of part of that. But you know what I mean. I mean, they're not a Canadian league unless they're in Quebec. And that's the only region that they're really not into right now other than the North, which isn't a feasible place to go. Look, if this study comes back and they choose that they say that they don't want a Canadian Premier League team, that it isn't something that should be desirable, then I think that we should all have a serious reflection on why they would come to that conclusion. So
yes, and maybe we should have a reflection at that point on what does it mean for the CPL and how they. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at. Like, if they look at this and go, oh no, this isn't something we want, then there's something wrong with the entry point to the CPL. Is what I'm saying. I mean, because otherwise the decision is, yes, this is a good idea, because why wouldn't you want a top of your pyramid for your players? Like, there's no logical reason to not have that other than the fact that maybe the barriers that have been put up are too large for them to overcome. And if that's the case, then I think the CanPL really needs to revisit what those barriers are. So let's watch this study carefully.
Exactly. Speaking of the CanPL, let's have a quick look at the table. Atletico Ottawa is now top of the table in the CanPL. 11 wins, 5 losses, 5 draws for Atletico Ottawa, followed by Forge, who's second with 35 points, a record of 11 wins, 6 losses, and 2 draws this season. Pacific FC, the defending champions, is third. They were eliminated from the CONCACAF League last weekend in penalties versus Herediano, and a club that both Toronto and Montreal faced over the last few years, over the last decade actually, in the CONCACAF Champions League. Pacific FC now can focus solely on the CanPL. Still a record of 4 wins and 1 loss in their last 5 games for Pacific, but still now 35 points, tied on points with Forge, but less wins. That's why they are third. Cavalry is fourth with 34 points. It's tight at the top, and then there's a big gap. Valor is fifth, 27 points. Wanderer is sixth, 24 points. York United, 7th, 23rd. And last of the CanPL, the Eddies FC Edmonton, with a very low 12 points after 21 games played. A minus 19 differential for FC Edmonton. I guess the playoffs are pretty much set. Atletico, Forge, Pacific, and Cavalry will be your top 4.
Yeah, Valor might think they have a chance there. I mean, Forge has been on a bit of a slide of late. They've lost their last 2. That said, they still have 2 games in hand on Ottawa and are just the 3 points back. That has closed a bit. When you look at the underlying numbers, though, Forge is, they have the most goals scored by a considerable amount, 40 goals scored in the season in just 19 games. They've allowed the least at 19 games. They have the best goal differential at plus 21. The next best is plus 5. So, I mean, look, this is a team that on its day is the best team in this league, but this league is close enough, much like MLS, it is close enough that on its day, any team can beat any other team here, and this is a single game playoff kind of league, so the championship is still very much up, but you are starting to see this divide, have and have-nots that I've referred to earlier. I think you can. I picked at the start of the season. I thought Ottawa would sneak into that 4th place spot. because I felt that the backing by Atletico, they would get this figured out and that they would join Pacific Forge and Cavalry as the elite in this league, and that those other 4 teams have to figure this out. And they aren't really figuring it out right now. I mean, Halifax had that kind of run to the final when they were basically playing at home at the Island Games. That's a tournament. And York snuck into the 4th playoff spot last year. But by and large, there is a divide between Forge, Pacific, and Cavalry. And now it looks like Ottawa has joined them. Whether that's a good thing, I think it is. I think leagues need tiers. Or a bad thing, lots of people disagree with me. They like parity. It is up to you to decide.
On those wisdom-filled words, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll preview the weekend in Major League Soccer and in the Canadian Premier League. And also, we'll make an announcement as next Monday, we'll be back video and in full force for almost daily. That's been the case over the last few weeks, but almost daily due to professional obligations. But starting Monday, video will be back. But right now, we'll take a short break. When we come back, Major League Soccer and the Canadian Premier League preview for the weekend.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back as I say thank you to our patrons. A little shout out to our patrons. You know who you are, famous people at patreon.com/2solitudes, 2 Solitudes podcast. Premium show, the last show actually related to what we're talking about today, talking about the CSB partnership with the Canadian Soccer Association. Duane and I, in our last show recorded a few weeks ago, we talked about this great divide that exists in Canada soccer and the controversy that exists. And you can listen to that show, the premium podcast, where no rights, no holds barred, uncensored, available at patreon.com/sports/2solitudes now. Patreon.com/2solitudes. Duane, a big weekend in Major League Soccer, but let's just continue with our CanPL momentum. 4 games this weekend: Cavalry and York tomorrow afternoon, Atletico Forge tomorrow evening, and on Sunday, Valor Pacific, FC Edmonton Wanderers. To me, the must-win here is Valor. If they want to fancy a potential playoff spot, they gotta beat Pacific, and they have to win at home.
Well, Pacific coming off the loss in the CONCACAF League, may it rest in peace. Well, it's not over yet, but Canada's involvement is. Yeah, I mean, that's ripe for an upset there anyway. So, but as you mentioned, Valor, as that tweener team, needs to get 3 points here if they want to be continuing this conversation. I think most neutral fans kind of should want that too, because as much as I just said I like a divide, I do think it's not going to be ideal if we play out the last 6 weeks of the regular season with none to play for really either.
No, exactly. You need some, well, I guess positioning, but because it's 38, 35, 35, so it's pretty close, and 34, so the points are pretty close, but yeah, that will be the case. There's also some midweek game, which is Valor and Forge. So Valor has a chance to not only win 2 games in 4 days, but also take away points from direct competitors in the standings. So a big 4 days for Valor. If they go 2-0, maybe they are a playoff team. If they go 0-2 or just drop points, maybe they're not.
Yeah, well, and if they do beat Forge, then the story is going to be a 3-game losing streak for a club that I've anointed the champions for about 6 weeks now. So yeah, I'll be wearing some egg then. But I still think they're probably going to be okay. The orange team there in Hamilton. But look, CanPL had a lot of good action this year. There's been a lot of skillful play. Unfortunately, some of the headlines are like the lack of attendance in Edmonton, the struggles in Edmonton, the sort of blooper goals that we've seen make international headlines, forget national headlines, international headlines in one case. But there has been some great soccer. So if you haven't had a chance yet, the stretch run is going to be great. And those top 4 teams, they can battle with each other, and it should be a fun playoff at the end. And hopefully Valor can make it a bit of a race too. The Valor team I like some of the stuff that they do, but they're just so inconsistent, which has always been the problem.
They don't have the same resources, right? They're, I guess, the best of the poor in a way. They're not necessarily Forge or Cavalry, where they have history, and even Pacific, where not necessarily the ownership group, but also the feeder and the connections and the network of players known and able to come in is a little higher. When you're looking at Valor and what Philip Dos Santos has done with the players he has to be commended for it.
Yeah, look, Kevin just hit on it. If you're an primary MLS listener or an American listener that's not really familiar with this, one of the great divides in the CanPL is that the teams that have essentially feeder programs or youth teams, which they're not directly related to, like they're not attached to them in a literal way, but realistically they are succeeding. You look at the top four. You've got
Dwayne,
Cavalry, which has Foothills. You've got Forge, which has Sigma. You have Atleti, which has Atletico Madrid, and now you have Pacific, which has essentially got the Vancouver Whitecaps.
The rejects, yeah. So let's be fair here. Tommy Wilden Jr., who's the big honcho in Cavalry, used to be the head of Foothills, and Foothills was involved in the creation of Cavalry, who is one of the biggest soccer associations in the Calgary region, right? So that's one. Sigma in Hamilton, in the GTA region, is one of the biggest private academy for soccer that created players like Cal Aaron and others in this beautiful game, and used to be run by Bobby Smirnianis. And of course, those are explanations why you have like unofficial associations with those organizations.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Kevin, I just have a work commitment that's just popped in, so we can either stop recording or
no problem. I'll just continue and look at Major League Soccer's weekend preview as we look now at the games that will take place tonight in Major League Soccer. Austin, LAFC, 8 p.m. this evening. It is a great and important game in the grand scheme of things when we look at the standings in the Western Conference. LAFC, who have clinched a playoff spot already, are 9 points ahead of Austin. But Austin, with a win, will fancy themselves and be the second club this year to get over 50 points so far this season in the Western Conference. Philly has 51 in the Eastern Conference. So that's a big game that will take place tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. We also have tonight a great game, a great rivalry game later this evening, as we have a sexy matchup at 10 p.m. A rivalry game between the Portland Timbers and the Seattle Sounders. A Cascadia matchup to close the evening. Minnesota-Houston will take place at 3:30 tomorrow. That's an interesting matchup for Minnesota. Houston needs to gather some points, but maybe too little too late. When we look at Minnesota, they are one of the surprises this year. They are fourth in the Western Conference with 41 points, only one behind Dallas, who's third in the Western Conference, and they will fancy themselves against Houston, and they are playing at Allianz Field in Minnesota. Charlotte-Toronto, interesting matchup. Can Toronto be a playoff team? They need wins, and a lot of them, and they need to put them together. We'll see if they can do that against Charlotte. The Red Bulls and in versus Miami at 7 p.m. That is at home for the Red Bulls, so it'll be difficult to win. The Red Bulls are a away team, I guess. They're favored on the road more they are at home. Interesting record at home. A 3-5-5 record at Red Bull Arena this year. But 8 wins, 3 losses, and 3 wins and 3 draws on the road. So quite a good record on the road, but not as much at home. And that is a very interesting dichotomy for the Red Bulls. Philly, Colorado, 7:30. Cincinnati, Columbus. That's also very interesting. But the game I'm really looking forward to is Chicago, Montreal. That is one of the interesting matchup for me. Montreal on the road, looking for their 8th win on the road this year, which would be continuously a record. This is a record year for Montreal at multiple levels. 51 points is a record for Montreal of points in one season. They're only 5 points away from that record with 8 games to play. Very interesting. When we look at Montreal now, they are 3rd in the power rankings according to MajorLeagueSoccer.com. 3rd. That's pretty good. One of their best spot ever. They're 2nd in the Eastern Conference, and Montreal is looking for another win. That would be their 8th game unbeaten. And it's quite a streak for Montreal. They are, as of now, the hottest team in Major League Soccer. Ramel Kyoto, who would have thought? He is one of the top strikers this year in Major League Soccer, maybe the biggest bargain in the history of Montreal. 14 goals this year, and he is also 4 assists. 2 goals and an assist last week for him. He's heading into this double game week, or like 3 games in 8 days. So Montreal players in your fantasy starting next Wednesday will be important. But for now, MLS is very fascinated by Montreal, and Montreal can continue to surprise going to Soldier Field, and heck, 15,000 fans, which is the average amount of fans this year for Chicago in a 70,000 seater stadium, looks very empty. Montreal will come in there with no lack of confidence, and they can surprise. Kansas City, San Jose, important matchup tomorrow night for the wooden spoon race. That's the only thing that's important in that one. Dallas, Real Salt Lake. Wooden spoon is for the worst team in the league, by the way. FC Dallas, Real Salt Lake. Vancouver, Nashville is the last game on Saturday night. And Sunday, doubleheader at TVA Spa, by the way, with Atlanta and DC, the Battle of the Uniteds. Orlando and New York, the Battle of the Cities, both available in French on TVA Spa on Sunday. And New England, LA Galaxy, 8 p.m. Sunday evening. That will close the night of MLS for everybody. I'm looking forward to this great weekend of action. Can Montreal continue to be the hottest team in the league? Will Djordje Mihailovic, now that he has signed or at least committed to AZ Alkmaar for next January, will he get a first point, meaning a goal or an assist, since he got injured on May 28th? Still hasn't had a direct influence or key pass on the scoreboard since coming back. Will he do the thing on Saturday? That's the question. But until then, I'm Kevin Laramee, and for Duane Rollins, we wish you a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.